Welcome back. As you know by now, Republican State Representative Fabian Basabe has been accused of sexually harassing two members of his staff, a charge he vehemently denies, I might add. These allegations, however, have brought a new spotlight on Basabe and his past conduct, including his alleged use of racial epithets and repeated acts of drunken buffoonery. This week, I spoke to the state representative, who is the Democratic leader in the Florida House, Fentrice Driskell.
Well, I'll start with the allegations, Jim, and I'll say that those are shocking and disturbing. When you read in detail, the graphic detail of these allegations, your heart goes out to this legislative aide and to his intern, who's just a college student. And, I started thinking about the power differential between an elected official and a young person who really is just trying to get a start in life or in their career, and part of the allegations that they were required to sign NDAs, which caused confusion over whether or not they could bring these allegations forward. So for me, the main focus is making sure that we have a safe workplace and environment for state employees, and especially for our legislative staff and interns who oftentimes are young people. And like I mentioned, they're just trying to get their start in their career. As for Representative Basabe, what I would say is, when you really look over the course of his life and the different allegations that have surfaced against him at various points in time, there seems to be a pattern of evading responsibility. These recent allegations have come to the surface, and I've seen no indication from him that he intends to take responsibility for any of this. If anything, it seems that he's trying to gaslight the public and gaslight his district and try to put the responsibility on his legislative aide, who again is a young person just starting his career. So all of this has been very troubling to me and very disturbing. I'll tell you another thing is that it is absolutely a distraction from the important work that we need to do in the legislature. And it seems that his constituents are not being served to the highest and best ability because of these distractions.
Do you believe Fabian Basabe should resign?
Well, yes, I do think he should resign, but I don't think he actually will, because again, what I've seen over the course of his life is that he doesn't take responsibility for his bad actions. I'll tell you that the community has already started organizing against him, because when Fabian campaigned, he promised to be an ally to the LGBTQ community. And then no sooner than he was elected did he start aligning himself with Governor DeSantis and voting for Governor DeSantis's anti-LGBTQ agenda. So he's already worn out his welcome with his own community and his constituents down in South Florida. And they want to see him go, and ultimately they will probably be the ones to decide to vote him out next year on November 5th.
You mentioned earlier the issue of the non-disclosure agreements that he required his staff to sign. He acknowledges that he requires them to sign it now, after initially sort of hedging about whether or not it was him asking them to sign. We now know that it was him, and he acknowledges that. Are you aware of any other legislator who has ever asked, do you ask employees to sign NDAs? And what's the danger of having a public official require their staff who work for the taxpayers to sign non-disclosure agreements? I mean, there's a lot of layers to that, it seems.
Right, and that is absolutely not the standard procedure for hiring state employees and bringing someone into your legislative office, that you have them sign an NDA. So I was very surprised when Representative Basabe initially said he just went with whatever was in the hiring package. I can tell you that that's not a part of the hiring package. And so to me, the danger and concern is what we've seen here, right? It caused confusion with these two young men about what their rights were, what their opportunities were to disclose this bad behavior. They were confused by that NDA, and they didn't even know if they could bring these allegations forward. And I'll tell you that it should not take having to bring a lawsuit and going public to have issues of sexual harassment and just general harassment in the workplace addressed. That's not the type of work environment that we want to have in the Florida legislature.
Obviously, a lot of attention is being cast on the allegations that he sexually harassed his staff. But, just as troubling, if not in some ways more troubling to me, are some of the allegations and some of the incidents that have been ascribed to him dealing with race and his views and his language as it relates to African Americans. He admits to using the word Negro in referring to security guards at the Hamptons a number of years ago when he was angry with them. He admits that he used it in a derogatory manner, as if there would be any debate about that, but he admits to referring to them as Negroes. And then in 2019 during Art Basel, he was denied admittance into a party, and there was a woman publicist working the door, an African-American woman, and he allegedly referred to her using the N-word, along with also calling her a peasant, which is apparently a favorite phrase of his to describe people. I realize he denies using the N-word, but your reaction when you hear things like that, in terms of the standard that sets, and just your overall reaction?
Right. Well, when there's so much smoke, you start to think that there's probably fire. And again, like I mentioned at the top of our interview, this seems to be a pattern with Representative Basabe of engaging in bad behavior and then denying it and taking no responsibility for it, or then perhaps coming out strongly initially saying, oh, I never did that. And then later on, you get a little bit of backpedaling and backtracking, and the truth starts to come out, and we start to learn and hear that no, he actually does use those words, right? We know that his staffers have come forward and shared information about some of the awful, abhorrent language that Representative Basabe has used to refer to other people, and particularly to African Americans. So it's all very problematic. The other thing is that it's hard to believe Representative Basabe when there's been so much undermining of public trust, right? He won this district by only 242 votes. That's nothing, right? That is a razor thin margin. So he acts as though he has a mandate in this seat, and the reality is that he doesn't. He has betrayed his constituents. He will say one thing and then do another. So it becomes very difficult to even believe that he's telling the truth about these allegations of the usage of racial slurs.
I know the focus is on what Representative Basabe did. That's where my investigation has been, but also looking at the larger picture, which is this goes to a larger question about House leadership to me. The initial investigation into the slapping incident in which Representative Basabe was accused of slapping one of his aides and telling him to stand in a corner in obviously another derisive, condescending way. The Speaker of the House, Paul Renner, hired an outside law firm to investigate the claims. The attorneys for that young man, as well as a second, say they told those investigators that there was also claims of sexual harassment, that there were more serious allegations in addition to the slapping incident, and none of that ended up showing up in the report, and there seems to be a question as to whether or not they informed the Speaker's office about these new allegations during the course of the investigation. We've requested all of the records from that have either been sent to the Speaker or by the law firm hired by the Speaker, and so far have not received those records. How important is it from your perspective that those records should be released and that there should be a full accounting of what House Speaker Renner knew and when he knew it?
I think that's very important. And I do hope that you get those records, because I want to know. And the way that protocol typically works in the House, I'm the Democratic leader, so I tend to take care of issues involving Democratic members. And then the majority leader and the Speaker tend to take care of issues involving members from the Republican Party. But to me, again, as I mentioned, it's so important to have a good, safe workplace for our state employees, many of whom do such hard work for not the pay that they deserve, particularly our legislative aides. They do not get paid nearly enough, especially with the rising cost of living and the cost of housing and transportation and utilities and all of these things. So they tend to be in these jobs for the right reason, like I said, trying to serve the community, just trying to get their start in their career. And we absolutely must protect them. So I read those allegations that you mentioned about the intern and the legislative aide for Representative Basabe raising the concerns of sexual harassment. And so if those concerns were raised to that law firm and then that law firm shared that with the Speaker's office, this is a huge problem, and we need to know really what happened.
We'll be right back.